I actually really love doing reviews on handheld mics. One, it's incredibly simple. There really isn't much to the review process. And the testing should be pretty easy to pass for any self-respecting company's product. But it also gives me an idea of some of the ways companies are trying to innovate and to market their products. That is when it comes up, because it seems there's less and less innovation these days, especially in handhelds. But not here with the Lewitt MTP5. This is their latest handheld mic that just might find itself on your mic stand. Let's see if that can happen. This is the Lewitt MTP5, as I mentioned, and I'm not going to lie. I didn't know Lewitt had a full lineup of handheld mics. And I'm talking a full lineup, even an interview microphone, which is cool and is now on my list. But it does also kind of make sense. One cannot live on LCT alone, right? However, if you do get a chance to check out their lineup, you should. These things are going up to the pro tier for sure, especially with that pro tier price. Now, as for what this microphone is, well, I don't have a ton of information being sent to me, and because I'm doing all this before release, I can't just jump online for it. I did, however, request the frequency response graphs and got this, but it's not a ton to go on. However, I can tell you what they're aiming for based on the marketing I received. This is probably the most important one. And that is an optimized cardioid pattern that is tuned to be less sensitive to higher frequencies from other instruments coming through your monitors. Meaning at the back of the cardioid, it's really squeezing out those high frequencies, which is interesting for sure. And I guess this is kind of self-explanatory with these microphones. Exceptional build and ready for the road. That is what I can tell you. And they even have this in all of their marketing. They call it full metal materials, which honestly is probably for the best with any kind of live gear. But there's something else here, and you're going to notice in this slide. They're calling this ring a cupping safe design. That's interesting. We're going to have to test that out in a second. Now, I should say, this isn't a new concept they just came up with for this microphone, but as far as I can see, the cupping safe design, as they call it, isn't mentioned on any of their cheaper end mics, or I guess cheaper. It is only available on the more expensive ones, so it is interesting to see that it shows up on this microphone. Okay, first we're going to start testing out the clown nose. You've noticed I've had it on for the first part of this video, and we're going to finish the video without it on. Just so you know, I have it on, but I do not have it pushed all the way back to the capsule. There's a bit of an air pocket between the mic capsule and the end of the foam, which is how you're supposed to put these things on, just so you know. But this is the sound of it on the microphone. This is with the clown nose off. Once again, this is with the clown nose on. And once again, this is with the clown nose off. Now for the off-axis rejection of the Lewitt MTP5. This is me speaking directly into the front of the capsule from about 4 inches away. Now I'm going to move around to the side of the capsule. And this is actually quite interesting with the off-axis rejection and how much it really pulls back on that. And the coloration, which I'm going to find like the coloration isn't bad as you move around to the side of the capsule. But now we're going to move around to about the 45-degree mark. This is where they're talking about taking out all those top-end frequencies to avoid feedback coming from the stage monitors. And you can really hear that it does kick it out. And as you get around to the back of the microphone, you're going to notice even more of that filtering. Once again, we're going to bring it back to about 45 degrees from the rear, and then we're going to bring it back to 90 degrees on the microphone, and we're going to bring it back to the front of the microphone. Now let's talk proximity. This is me speaking into the microphone from about 4 inches away. Then I'm going to get on top of the microphone, and you're going to notice the usual proximity effect kicking in for most of these types of microphones, the handheld dynamics. And we're going to move back, and we're about 4 inches off. We're going to move up into it, and we're going to get all up on its business. And this is with the proximity effect when you're right on top of it. So let's talk handling noise. And this is the one thing that I'm actually really impressed with this microphone. is usually when I do handling noise on these microphones, I'm pretty rough with them because you kind of want to simulate the worst case experience on stage. And this actually has some fantastic handling noise protection on it. Handling noise is one of the worst things for feedback as well, because it just creates this like sound coming through the speakers and then getting back into the microphone, and it can be really miserable. So having good handling noise on your microphone is actually really important, and this thing does it quite well. I've noticed a lot of people tend to like putting their hand up and over. I mean, there's even a picture of the Pope doing this. This is probably the most popular style of cupping I've ever seen, though. This is just with the two fingers around the middle of the microphone. And you see it a lot on the SM58 like this. And it's something about this ring that people like to just wrap their finger around. And we're going to talk about the sound of the cupping through this SM58 in a second. But usually what this does is it creates this boxiness in the microphone. It actually wrecks the sound of the microphone quite a bit. So this is with that cupping protection. So here I'm cupping the microphone, not cupping the microphone, and you can actually hear there's no difference, which is actually pretty cool. Now, when you take an SM58 and you cup it like this, you instantly change the sound of the microphone, and you take that away and you cup it, and you can hear the sound of the microphone changing as soon as you do that. Once again, the Lewitt, and this is with the cupping on, with the cupping off, and you can hear how little it changes with that. That's really cool. I don't know why I threw the D5 in here. I threw the D5 in because, I mean, from a looks perspective, it's relatively close. This is the AKG D5. Difference, this one is a super cardioid versus the Lewitt MTP5, which is just a cardioid. But, I mean, just from an aesthetic perspective, this is what it sounds like as I'm going back and forth between these two microphones. Which one do you like? The AKG D5 or the Lewitt MTP5? And I actually just noticed it. The Sennheiser E835 also has a little bit of that design with a little bit of the, yeah. Anyways, this is the Lewitt MTP5 and this is the Sennheiser E835. So which one do you like as I go between the Lewitt MTP5 and the Sennheiser E835? Which one do you like? This is actually one of my favorite microphones on stage, and this is the Lewitt MTP5. When I say my favorite mic on stage, it's not like I'm not getting on stage without my Sennheiser. It's just been the mic that I've used in the past and I've enjoyed using in the past. And the Lewitt, which I've never actually used a Lewitt microphone on stage, which I'm actually kind of curious. Maybe I'll get back to doing stage work. What do you think? Anyway, which one do you like as I go between them? Now, I know this one is a lot of people's favorites. This is the SEV7, and this one is the Lewitt MTP5. And this is what it's like as I'm going back and forth between them. I know a lot of people love the SEV7s. I don't actually, again, I didn't know that Lewitt had a handheld lineup of mics, and I run a YouTube channel based on that very thing, so bad YouTuber. Which one do you like as I go back and forth between them? Next, we're going to the big kahuna, though. All right, and now we have the big kahuna. This one is the SM58 up against the Lewitt MTP5. Now, for any of y'all who are going to be like, whoa, the SM58's overrated, overpriced, the whole industry since the 60s has been using this microphone. I would hardly call that overrated. And considering this thing only costs $100, that's incredible. However, there are also a lot of things to consider when buying your handheld stage mic. I do plan on doing a whole video about choosing your stage mic and maybe talking about some of the different things you need to think about when you're going into this. Stay tuned for that. Get subscribed if you haven't already. But what do you think as I go between the standard Shure SM58 and the Lewitt MTP5? Which one do you like more? Now, it's hard to be upset at another well-priced option to challenge for your money. Further not as well for not creating a carbon copy of another brand just to push something out. And even better, they actually introduced something impactful with that design that might make somebody buy this over another handheld like the SM58. I know a few small bands that have a singer that needs to stop cupping the mic. Maybe this is the gateway drug to that. But I do know that a lot of this is also personal preference, and I'd love to know what you think of this microphone as a live handheld mic. Also, I kind of want to know what you look for in a live handheld microphone. Let me know down below. Cheers, guys, and thanks for watching.